there has been, we talked about the hegemonies, you know, there are those who felt they're bigger than us. There are those who felt they're more developed than others, so they can talk down. But that is finished. That's an era that is ending. We are coming back on the table as African states and saying, you're my brother, you're my sister. This is what is working for Africa. And I think the president, we must commend him. He's really put out a fight to have Africa unite. And I think the presidents who are here is proof that we can work together. There is place for us in Africa to work together.
Okay, so how will Kenya benefit from Libya? And how will South Africa, Mozambique, or Tunisia, call it, or even South Sudan, one country, how will one country benefit in as far as this is concerned? Oh, fine, we'll work as a nation, we'll as a continent, as one, but how will one country benefit from the other?
I'll give you an example. During COVID,
yes,
we learned our protocols from Liberia. Yeah, there was no European country that could tell us exactly how to handle COVID. Liberia gave us the blueprint of how we did our protocols during COVID. So if we are talking about leveraging on Africa, then Africa has it. Then again, look at what we are having. We have ports. Yes, if we can partner with
Macky Sall,
Macky Sall
for
Senegal.
Oh wow. Yeah, even Senegal was very at the forefront when it came to how we are dealing with COVID. Look at our own innovations. We created machines, ventilators from here that were being sent out to Africa from Kenya. So if we can do...
And it was quick fire. I mean, by the time those ventilators were coming here, it was so fast.
So we can leverage. We don't have to wait for a plane to come all the way. We have it here in Africa. So it's time for us now to see how best. Yes, Tanzania here has put an electric train. Do they have the power? They can leverage from Tanzania, from Uganda. They can leverage from us. So there's so much we will gain from having this unity and reducing the competition, unhealthy competition. Climate change is reducing us to the same level. If it is flooding, you'll be on top of the roof in Tanzania, in Morocco, in Egypt. There is nobody who will be spared. So if we don't act together, then we are doomed together. It's as simple as that.
Okay, Abdi, I know our take home, even as journalists, will be the Nairobi Declaration. So that will be a follow-up whenever we'll have the next Africa Climate Summit, whichever country they'll give us after the communique will come out. But now moving forward, how are we going to have it? Because when you look at a situation where this is happening and the summit is over, so what next?
The what next for me will be that by the time we have the next African summit, we should have things to showcase.
Yes, as a continent.
As a continent and as a country. That when we go for this summit, Kenya is saying we have 50 climate change adaptation programs that have cushioned our people so that there's a best practice exchange, not just, just having people gather together. That you come here and say, before we were having bad crop failure or this was happening, but because of the programs we've adopted, we now have better food security. Can we learn from Burundi? How have they made themselves food secure? How has Uganda made themselves food secure? What can Kenya leverage on to make sure that we are food secure as a country? Yes, so when we go for the next summit, we are saying this is where Kenya was. Yes, today this is where Kenya is. What have you done differently? Because we have to ask that question. What have we done differently? The what next? Because here, yes, we are uniting. Perfect. But are we going to change our situations? Do we even actually know what is our situation currently? So there is hope and there's really huge opportunities for us to learn from one another.
Right.
Indeed, we can see various heads of state as well as other dignitaries flocking in. We just saw earlier the Mozambique president, that is Filipe Nyusi, as well as Senegal President Macky Sall, who are greeting the president and having a photo session. I can confirm to you right now that we have 9 heads of state who have arrived at the Kenyatta International Convention Center for the African Climate Summit. As Victor told you earlier, there's supposed to be 23. We hope that they'll all even surpass that particular number of 23 because the president was calling for the unity and the unifying factor of the African continent. Even that issue of the African Climate Summit, where it will be hosted next, we do anticipate once this function concludes, the heads of state will concur, given that the AU chair, their chairperson of the African Union is here already. They will announce the next host country of this particular summit. Dr. Should we be seeing this not just because the president said something that was staggering yesterday? We had to wait for 31 years to hold such an event in Africa. Should this be a continuing trend?
You see, we have a societal transition. Now, I'll explain my comment here.
Yeah.
Society is transiting. The generation we have today is not our generation and the generations before.
Yeah.
For them, the generation we have here is we work together, regardless of where you come from, to create a solution. This is the generation, the youth we are talking about. They are more interested in working together for a common purpose. They don't remember their tribes, they don't remember where they're coming from. So that unity that this youth is having is what is making this summit have a change and an impact, because South Sudanese are working with Kenyan youth. Yes, people from Egypt are working with Kenyan youth. So there's unity that is coming cross generations, and that has made this summit very key in addressing that. So in the future, because the generation we have has broken the silos. You know, we lived before, I'm a Kenyan, I'm not interested, I have.
Yeah.
But they don't have that. They're changing the whole scenario of where we can now trade with each other, where we can work with each other. And that is very exciting because we have a future. That shows you there's a future for Africa. And being Africa youthful is one of the most youthful continents, then we know for sure this will be happening more often and more targeted with solutions for every country and context in place, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. The question of continuity, because African heads of state will come to Nairobi. We just to find out that person, the dignitary, the delegate, who is. But we're talking about continuity from this generation to the next. And you've correctly put it. Africa has the biggest number of youthful population. But when you have the delegates, the heads of states coming here, having the declaration, Nairobi Declaration, this should be the first in 31 years. But then now moving to the next generation to come.
That's the Prime Cabinet Secretary, Musalia Mudavadi.
Oh, okay.
Now officially is being received as well. At the
I love the way you laughed at it.
No, why I laughed, it's because the president even in State House clearly stated he cannot reach an event before you. So he ought to have been there already waiting to greet him. Maybe Rigathi Gachagua is having a laugh.
It's just a delegate. All right, that is the Prime Cabinet Secretary, Musalia Mudavadi, popularly known as Madividi, all right, our own, all right, also gracing the occasion, quite important.
Yes.
We need our voices to be correctly put. After that's a good one, all right, okay. So the continuity effect is moving to the next generation. After the declaration is done, you know, the funding is there, the African continents, they'll have their common bank, so quote unquote. So having it move to the next level, it's a continuous kind of a wheel that will continue. Are we seeing this being sustained even after the current crop of leaders shall have exited the stage?
One, we will have continuity if, one, the youth are involved. I am hoping that all these heads of state will demand that the youth be present in this conversation, because we can't just sit in our own boardrooms here and forget the people who we are talking about. The president was very clear that the voice of the person, the people must be heard. That's what he said in his speech. So if the voice of the people must be heard, if the youth are the majority, then I expect the youth to be heard in this summit. Wherever they may be, they must be heard. Yeah.
The reason I'm still laughing, it it is still the Prime Cabinet Secretary Musalia Mudavadi there. Maybe the president is asking him, how can I reach an event before you? Maybe they're laughing on that particular day. Maybe he's explaining because the president clearly stated, if you come late, I don't want traffic issues as an excuse. Maybe he's asking people to continue the carry.
Yeah, so the youth must be heard in this particular forum. And the gender aspect now comes in, not just talking about the youth, but actually having provisions for the youth. And they must be heard in here. Yes, COP28 has to hear the youth because, take it from me, if we are planning to deal with climate change in the next 10 years, yes, it can't be the here and now. Yes, we must stop these here and now policies. We want to make declarations here and now. Can this here and now think about 10 years from now? We need that. And that 10 years from now must factor in the youth. If we are making any change, I say if because it's conditional. We can do all the showbiz we want. But if we can't factor in the youth, that transition, the sustainability aspect may not be possible.
That is the Ghanaian President Victor. Nana Akufo-Addo coming out of his vehicle. Akufo-Addo, Nana Akufo-Addo. These are big heads of state coming from the west part of Africa. We've seen a number of them. We've seen the Senegalese president, now the Ghanaian president. Now they have reached 10 heads of state, still keeping the count, Daktari and Victor, to see if we'll even surpass that 23 target that it was set by the African Climate Summit organizers for this year. Nana Akufo-Addo is the latest head of state to make his way to this particular vicinity of the Kenyatta International Convention Center, where various heads of state, as I told you earlier, we have presidents from Mozambique, Senegal, Comoros, South Sudan, Sierra Leone, Tanzania, Burundi, Egypt, as well as Ethiopia, even the UN Special Envoy, that is John Kerry, to the extent of the United Nations Secretary General, that is Antonio Guterres. Maybe he'll be picking up a few pointers ahead of the organized UN COP28. Maybe should that even be kickstart the conversation at COP28? Should we be seeing, Daktari, that conversation being started even before COP28? The lead up to the COP28 should be this Nairobi Declaration report that will come out. It should not be any other document that we are used to seeing as Africans collecting dust in the cabinet. We even talked earlier about the enforcement issues, but we have so many good policies, but at the end of the day, we do not implement them.
Yes. This Nairobi Declaration, as much as we want to talk about COP28, we must live here with tangible actions that we are saying we are putting on the table. This is the deal. We are saying in COP28, this is what we want done for Africa. Yes, that has to be very clear from the time we live here, so that even as you demand for that space, you're not demanding to ask for cars, the planes and all these other things that we've been complaining about. That we know that what is the deal on the table. This is what Africa is asking. This is what Africa is saying. Yes, and I think COP28 will be a different COP because they are measuring action. Yes, what is the action we are measuring as Africa, as Kenya? What can we say? Can we report as success stories for Africa, as success stories for Kenya? And then you'd say, yes, this is what we've done with these resources. Are you able to increase our resources? Yes. Then tell us how this funding will be done, the transparency to it, not so many, cutoffs and, caps that you want to put in that, yes, here you've given us funding, but you also want to hold us back by giving other conditions that you've never set out from the word go. So how are you going to finance us? Yes. And then there's also the other thing that Africa also has to think about, their own financing. Yes. Can you be able to give your own, show us what is in your own kitty as you demand for more for that money? What is your own kitty as Africa?
Let me give you the opportunity, Daktari, to have a sip of your hot water. We head over to listen to our beautiful communities like the Ma culture. Let's get to hear what is happening at KICC now.
That is amazing pictures. I'm just wondering why we don't have the Luo traditional culture dancers from Kochia or, or, or gracing that occasion.
Victor, you're used to a political event. This is not a political event. This is all environmental matters. Who
that's
better?
where we have Masai. You should also have some, from Central, Gaddafi. I mean, to grace
My
it. But
people to
anyway,
come and
nonetheless,
dance.
Masai always bring us that feel, of being Kenya.
Yeah,
And we're always proud of that. Always
Yes.
proud of that. All right, so we're still continuing the coverage. Vijay joining us, the live pictures from the Kenyatta Convention, International Convention Center here in Nairobi. The delegates coming for...
That's an interesting person to come. That is the Azimio leader, Raila Amolo Odinga, being greeted by none other than the Deputy President of Kenya and the AU Chair, Musa Faki.
Exactly.
That will be a photo for the years between him and President William Ruto. We all know that right now there is a bipartisan talks going at the Bomas of Kenya, aside from what is happening here at the Kenyatta International Convention Center. The ODM leader has well been advocating for better environmental changes. You do remember when he was the former premier of this particular country, once he even became the cabinet minister for roads and transport, he clearly advocated for people not to cut trees, that the roads should pass where they ought to be, the blueprint that were set by the colonial masters that we were under before we gained our independence. Quite interesting. The Azimio leader, Raila Amolo Odinga,
correctly, with climate and with this,
bringing people
it
together.
knows no political boundary. I mean, it affects. It doesn't. It affects everyone. So, as correctly put it, you have to see how it's going to be. I mean, that's just but a photo. But after that, what happens? I mean, here we are.
It will be very interesting. I'm sure the ODM leader will be also ushered into the VIP lounge where the other various, because he has that connection with other, given that he served as a AU special envoy in terms of infrastructure, roads as well, which he later abdicated for that particular position so that another person can take it. He stated that he has so many duties here within the country, but he'll also play a key role. This is what the government has been trying to adopt, allowing the opposition also to have their say, even as the majority have their way in every sector of the government. We also saw that there are various recommendations that will be put forth in the coming days that will shift the political structure of this particular country, having the opposition, office of the opposition leader, and of course will be led by none other than the ODM leader, Raila Amolo Odinga. Already, as I told you, we have 11 heads of state who are currently present at the Kenyatta International Convention Center. The person you just saw last was the Azimio leader, Raila Amolo Odinga, arriving, and I'm sure he'll head to the VIP lounge where the other heads of state are seated, maybe to banter a little bit before they are led to the Savo boardroom, where the event, that is the epicenter, and the high-octane activities will lead up to this particular convention center. Other various dignitaries like the U.S. Special Envoy John Kerry, as well as the United Secretary General Antonio Guterres, and I'm sure the Ambassador of the U.S. to Kenya, that is Meg Whitman, and the other EU commissioners are also present at the Kenyatta International Convention Center. We'll also be updating you as to what will be happening within that particular ballroom. We do know that today will be the delegation or rather plenary session that will be steered by President William Ruto, addressing matters of climate change. Yesterday, he just gave us a teaser while he was opening the issues they're going to discuss, shifting from the blame game, maybe Daktari, shifting from the blame game. That is the Nairobi governor, that is Johnson Sakaja, who arrived. Even yesterday, he received a substantial amount of money, I do say, from the French government, close to 156 million in his initiative to feed school feeding program that has been witnessed in the capital. Maybe is this also, Daktari, a blessing in disguise, having this so many people, and we can have the devolved units also structuring their bargaining agreements with other heads of states here?
I think the Nairobi City Council, the governor, is better placed now to articulate issues for the city. You're talking about green infrastructure. This is where he'll get it. He wants funding. I'm happy that he got very good money for the feeding, because that improves the level of school attendance by the children. Now they don't have to worry about food. They can now go and learn. And this is good for the Nairobi County. We have worked with them on the clean air catalyst that I was telling you about. He has been very noble about it, and he's really interested in seeing that we clean the air for Nairobi. So I think being here at this time and being able to handle all this number of guests tells how this county is blessed. So this is good for Nairobi County as a whole, and even as a country. We are seeing, I hope the next time they'll still insist on coming to Kenya so that we take them to Luo Nyanza so Victor can be with the dancers.
Now that's the First Lady, Rachel Ruto. We saw her and other First Ladies and Second Ladies of various countries in Africa leading their initiative as well as the women of this particular country. They are leaders because once they speak, at least it is a little bit implemented. Maybe are you happy, maybe Dr. Bessie, seeing the First Lady leading this initiative, gender initiative when it comes to fighting for climate? I'm sure where Professor Wangari Maathai, the late Professor Nobel laureate winner, is currently happy with the ladies of this particular country, of this generation.
Yes, I am very much happy with the fact that our First Lady is at the forefront to fight for climate change. Remember, the hardest hit group of people are women and youth and young children when it comes to climate vulnerability. So being able to champion this from her position and her office is very commendable. This is very good. We need to hear more of these voices, female voices in this space. And I think she's setting the pace, and this is really commendable. She's telling us that we can do. We too have a place on the table. Yes, and that for me is a good sign that we are moving forward to a better place.
And speaking of the devil, the guy who has been speaking about the Rwandan president, that is Paul Kagame, is here because I'm sure, Dr. you have been to Rwanda.
Oh, yes.
I myself have been to Rwanda. And the economic initiatives, not just the economic, environmental initiatives that Rwanda have begun for the last few years have been commendable. It's like a different scenery compared to other countries. Let's confirm if it is Paul Kagame coming out of that particular vehicle. He will be the 12th head of state. It is him, Paul Kagame, Rwanda president. He is now the 12th head of state to currently arrive at the Kenyatta International Convention Center. All our neighbors, except for Uganda, we're expecting to see Uganda President Yoweri Museveni, but all our neighbors are here from Tanzania, Burundi, as well as Ethiopia, South Sudan. They're all here, even to the extent of Somalia. I know right now there's a little bit of political turmoil in Somalia. We do hope that the head of state will also make his way to this particular summit, given that the Horn of Africa as well plays a pivotal role when it comes to the climate issue matters. Dr. we were talking about the role of gender. We saw what the late Professor Wangari Maathai did for this particular country. That's why we have so many parks, we have so many trees, especially here in the capital, to the extent even Sakaja, when he came into office, he made a clerical error when he cut those trees, very significant trees within the CBD. But should this be adopted not just in Nairobi, but in all counties, that it should, let's say, for example, if we have reached that critical stage of cutting down a tree, we should be planting more, leading up to what the president is saying, 15 billion trees till 2023. Is that achievable?
In terms of the tree, there's tree planting and there's tree growing. We can be planting trees year in out, but how many are growing? You see, that's the question. That's one. Then do we understand the value of the trees we are growing as well? We just don't want to plant 15 billion trees for the sake of it. Then tomorrow, someone else will come and cut all those trees that we have planted, 15 billion of them. We must have a place for why we're having these trees? Do we understand why we need these trees? Because trees are very critical when it comes to cleaning up the air pollution. So if we reduced the concrete, and you see, there's also a bit that Professor Wangari Maathai was very keen about, grassroots democracy.
Yeah.
If people at the grassroots level can understand why they need to plant those trees, then you will see nobody will cut a tree. Why Nyeri County has the highest percentage of tree cover, she worked with the people at the grassroots level. So they know the value of a tree. How many Kenyans know the value of a tree? You've planted 2. I've planted 2,000. Yes? And maybe I'll infect you more to plant more and have more of these trees, because I've told you the value of a tree. How many Kenyans know in their different counties that this is the value of a tree? How much? And you see, like now we are willing to cut trees for roads. Yeah, we cut how many trees so that we have the express highway?
Paveway for the expressway. Okay.
Yes. How many trees have we cut on Gong Road so that we have trees that have outlived some of us? They were there for 100 years. Yeah. Why is the value of that tree if we have to cut it? Look at the pathway here going to Valley Road. There was a shade. You would walk any time of the day. The sun would not hit you because we had very nice jacaranda trees. But they have been cut because we want roads. When we find the value for that tree, then we will have these trees everywhere. We will make sure that even in our homes, remember before, our farms were surrounded by a skirting of trees. In the middle was another skirting of trees. Yes? Why have we removed that? And it was very useful in terms of the humus that is good for making the soil. We didn't need fertilizer as much. So that value of the tree needs to come out very clear in the long run. Yeah.
Victor, who do we have?
Yeah, that's Pastor Dorcas Regade, received by
None other than his husband.
none other than Deputy President, right? So you can imagine the conversation as you know,
Just
Karibu.
like what we saw with the First Lady and the President, yeah.
Exactly. That is Pastor Dorcas Regade. That is a wife to Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, also in attendance during this particular event. It's going to be a very busy day for the president, so to speak. Receiving the president and then now move into the main plenary for the discussion. But the most important thing is whatever they're going to come up with in terms of the Nairobi Declaration as Africa. And Daktari, you would imagine COP28 coming up, not sometimes in November. And what do you think the message they're going to have as Africa heads of state they're going to take with them to COP28, because this is going to happen in Dubai? But as Africa heads of state, already they have their declarations, they have their all paperwork done. But then now COP28 is also here. The big boys are also here. They're also waiting for the international community also be here, the donors. What do you think they're going to go with on paper during the COP28?
The first, I think, is, if you ask me, the issue of finance.
Yes.
I think most African countries today are talking about the resource. And, we look at finance in terms of only money, but finance comes in different ways. Resource, technology, capability, all that are part of how do we get to finance these technologies that we have locally. How do we get to upscale those that have been brought in here? It's still part of the financing aspect. So I think for them, their first take home will be to how do we finance our own local initiatives that are dealing with climate change? That's the first bit. Secondly, I think it will be a learning curve for African states to see how the United Arab Emirates have changed their situation. They don't have trees. They're in a desert ecosystem. Yes, but they make billions of dollars. They are one of the most visited tourist sites. Yes. How can we leverage by making sure, because Africa has it all. how do when they go to this COP28, it will be a learning curve for them to see how Dubai has done it and how that whole region is changing. Look at how Qatar, a country we did not even know, now Qatar is commanding huge amount of visitors there. Look at how they've changed, how they exchange their technologies within themselves. It should be a learning point for Africa because we have it. Victor, never doubt the richness of our country.
And that brings back, you know, you're putting it so passionately. We have it.
Yes.
So, kwa lugha ya mtaa, then shida imekuwa wapi?
Shida imekuwa, you know, is selfish needs. Yeah, and greed.
Yes.
Yes, I want to be the one owning everything. Yes, I want to be the one you come and bow down to. You know, that colonial mentality that you must bow down to basically for
someone somewhere else.
Yes, for me to give you what is rightfully yours. But if we removed this bowing down and trying to suck up to people and say, no, Mimi, as Kenya, I have this. What do you have on the table? You realize there are people who have leveraged on Africa and yet they don't have. And those who have are the ones who are missing out. We are talking today as a clarion call for Africa. Why? We have been exploited, over-exploited. So we have it. For sure, take it from me, we do have it. If you only walk across a few counties here, the innovations I've seen in terms of climate adaptation, they leave you asking, what is, you know, how did we get here? But the finance is what is lacking.
All right. Daktari, Abdi, we also have our cups of tea here.
Yes.
I think it's now high time we cross over to NAIROBI at the KICC. It also give us certain sound. Perhaps they have got that crystal ball on what is happening there at the KICC. Perhaps you can give us a rough picture on what's happening there. There you have it. Quite beautiful. NAIROBI, if you can hear us, please take it away.
Tunakujia kwa njia ya moja kwa moja kabisa kutoka kwenye ukumbi wa kimataifa wa KICC, ambapo kwa leo ni siku ya pili ya kongamano hili maarufu kabisa, ambapo tumeweza kuona kuwa marais kutoka mataifa mbalimbali barani Afrika wameweza kuwasili hapa ili kuweza kuhudhuria kongamano hili linalohusiana na mabadiliko ya tabia nchi barani Afrika, na wamekuja ili kuweza kuhakikisha kuwa wanapata suluhu dhidi ya athari ambazo zimekuwa zikikumba bara hili la Afrika, na vile vile kuweza kuhakikisha kuwa wanapoenda katika makongamano yale ya mataifa yote ya ulimwengu wanaweza kuwa na msimamo mmoja ili waweze kutetea bara hili la Afrika ambalo kwa mara nyingi limekuwa likipitia shida nyingi sana, licha ya kuwa bara hili ndilo linatoa gesi kidogo sana ambazo zinaathiri ulimwengu, lakini ukiweza kuangalia athari za mabadiliko ya tabia nchi, basi bara la Afrika ndilo linaathirika kwa zaidi. Basi tumeweza kuona kuwa baadhi ya marais ambao wameweza kufika katika kongamano hili. Hii leo tumeweza kuona yule wa Sierra Leone ambaye ni Madabio ameweza kuwasili. Rais wa Tanzania Samia Suluhu vile vile ashawasili. Evariste Ndayishimiye wa Burundi amewasili. Yule wa Sudan Kusini Salva Kiir amefika vile vile. Yule wa Egypt Abdel Fattah al-Sisi vile vile ameweza kuwasili. Wa Comoros Azali Assoumani vile vile amewasili. Na vile vile mjumbe kutoka Marekani John Kerry vile vile alikuwepo hapo jana, akaweza vile vile kutoa maoni yake katika mjadala ambao ilikuwa ikiendelea hapo jana, na vile vile hii leo atakuwepo katika mjadala ambao utakuwa ukifanyika katika ukumbi huu wa kimataifa wa KICC. Vile vile tumemwona rais wa Mozambique Filipe Nyusi aliweza kuwasili, na vile vile tumeweza kuona rais wa Rwanda ambaye ni Paul Kagame vile vile amewasili katika ukumbi huu wa kimataifa wa KICC. Vile vile rais wa Ethiopia ambaye ni Zade Wokzud vile vile ameweza kuwasili. Basi mtazamaji, kama unavyoona kwenye runinga yako ni kuwa Shughuli nzima hapa katika ukumbi huu wa KICC upo shwari kabisa, tayari kuanza kongamano ama mijadala ambayo inatarajiwa kuweza kuanza hii leo, na itakuwa ikiongozwa na rais wa taifa hili Dr. William Ruto, ambaye alifika mapema kabisa na amekuwa akiwapokea baadhi tu ya wajumbe na vile marais ambao wamekuwa wakiwasili katika ujumbe huu wa kimataifa wa KICC. Vile tumeweza kuona katibu mkuu wa Umoja wa Mataifa Antonio Guterres vile ameweza kuwasili katika ukumbi huu. Vile mwenyekiti wa Umoja wa Afrika ambaye ni Musa Faki vile yupo katika ukumbi huu, na wamekuwa wakiwapokea tu baadhi ya wajumbe na vile marais ambao wameweza kuwasili katika kongamano hili la kihistoria kabisa, ambalo ni kongamano la kwanza kabisa ambapo tumeweza kuona kuwa mataifa ya bara Afrika yameweza kufika ili kuweza kujadili na kupata suluhu dhidi ya athari ya mabadiliko ya hali ya hewa ama tabia nchi ambayo yamekuwa yakikumba mataifa mbalimbali. Baadhi tu ya mambo ambayo yanatarajiwa yaweze kujadiliwa katika kongamano hili la hii leo ni masuala kuhusiana na ufadhili wa miradi ambayo inaweza kukinga bara hili dhidi ya athari ambazo zimeweza kushuhudiwa katika mataifa mbalimbali, na vile kwani tumeweza kuona kuwa Afrika imekuwa katika sehemu ambayo imekuwa ikipata fedha kidogo sana katika kufadhili miradi ambayo inaweza kuwezesha kukata makali ya mabadiliko ya tabia nchi, lakini haijakuwa ikipata pesa hizo. Na vile tumeweza kuona kuwa licha kuwa baadhi ya mataifa ya Afrika yamekuwa yakipata mikopo tuseme, ama fedha kutoka kwa mataifa mengine na taasisi kuweza kusaidia katika athari za mabadiliko ya tabia nchi, hizi pesa hazijakuwa za kutosha, na hata hiyo mikopo ambayo imekuwa akipewa imekuja na riba ya juu sana, swala ambalo kwa sasa basi marais wengi wamesema kuwa itabidi wakae waweze kujadiliana, waweze kupata mwafaka na mfumo dhabiti ya kuhakikisha kuwa wanaweza kupata fedha, na hata kama ni mikopo wanapata basi ya kuweza kufadhili miradi hii, iwe ni mikopo ambayo ina riba ambayo inawafaa kama vile inavyofaa mataifa ambayo yameweza kuendelea. Ikishuhudiwa kuwa tumeweza kuona katibu mkuu wa Umoja wa Mataifa ameweza kuwasili hapa, basi tunatarajia kuwa tutaweza kusikia ni yepi ambaye ataweza kusema ili kuhakikisha kuwa hata Afrika basi inapoenda katika kongamano lile linalojulikana kama la COP28 ambalo linatarajiwa kuweza kufanyika katika sehemu ya kule Dubai, Afrika ikienda kama moja itakuwa na usemi upi, na itakapoenda na usemi huo utaweza kuchukuliwa vipi na Umoja wa Mataifa. Na Umoja wa Mataifa kama basi umeweza kuwasili katika kongamano hili maarufu sana la kihistoria, basi itaweza kusikiza kweli semi ambazo zitaweza kutolewa katika kongamano hili, na vile tunatarajia vile kuweza kuona sera ambazo zitaweza kujadiliwa katika mjadala huu ambao unatarajiwa kuweza kufanyika hii leo, na sera hizo zitakuwa zikigusia mambo yapi. Baadhi ya mambo ambayo tunatarajia yaweze kuzungumziwa katika mjadala huu ni mambo kuhusiana na ufadhili wa miradi ya mabadiliko ya tabia nchi, na vile tumeweza kuona kuwa katika masoko ya kaboni vile tunatarajia kuweza kuona ni jinsi gani bara Afrika litaweza kukubaliwa kuweza kunadi kaboni ambayo inaweza kutolewa, na vile kizingatiwa kuwa sisi ndio bara ambalo linatoa kaboni ya asilimia chini kabisa ambayo ni 4%, basi itakuwa vipi? Tutaweza kupewa mkono wa juu kabisa katika masoko ya kaboni, na iwapo pia katika soko hilo fedha ambazo zitakuwa zikitolewa ama katika mnada huo wa kaboni zitakuwa zikienda vipi katika mataifa ya bara Afrika. Mtazamaji, kama unavyoona katika runinga yako ni kuwa wajumbe kutoka mataifa mbalimbali washawasili, wameketi tayari tu kusubiri kwanza ama kung'oa nanga kwa kikao maarufu sana ambacho kinatarajiwa kuweza kuanza muda si mchache, na kikao hicho kitakuwa kikiongozwa na Rais Dr. William Ruto akiwa na wenzake kutoka mataifa mbalimbali barani Afrika ambao nilikuwa nimekueleza kuwa wameweza kuwasili. Baadhi tu ya marais, mtazamaji, ambao naweza kukujuza ambao wameweza kuwasili katika kongamano hili speciali sana la kihistoria ambalo linafanyika kwa mara ya kwanza kabisa, kama Rais Dr. William Ruto alivyosema hapo jana, Ni kongamano ambalo linafanyika baada ya miaka 31 baada ya janga hili la mabadiliko ya tabia nchi kuweza kutangazwa pale kule katika maeneo ya Rio, na vile vile katika mazungumzo ama makubaliano ambayo yaliweza kufanyika mwaka wa 1997. Basi imekuwa ni miaka 31 tangu miaka hiyo, tangu kutangazwa kwa mabadiliko ya tabia nchi kuwa janga, ndipo Afrika basi imeweza kujumuika kwa umoja kuhakikisha kuwa wanaweza kujadili masuala yao kwa pamoja, na wanapoenda katika makongamano ya Umoja wa Mataifa wanakuwa na usemi mmoja ambapo sasa wataweza kusikizwa vizuri, na iwapo ni kupewa fedha, watapewa fedha ambazo zina maana, fedha ambazo zitaweza kuwasaidia katika miradi mbalimbali. Na vile vile fedha hizi basi wanatumai kuwa zitaweza kuwafikia Wakenya, na vile vile Kenya inatarajia kuwa pesa hizi zitaweza kufikia Wakenya na vile vile mataifa mengine ambayo yameweza kuwasili hapa, na mataifa ya bara Afrika vile vile natarajia kuwa yataweza kupata pesa hizo na zitaweza kuwafikia vile vile watu wao katika mataifa hayo. Basi kama nilivyokuwa nimekujuza, ni kwa baadhi ya marais ambao wameweza kuwasili katika kongamano hili. Ni rais wa Sierra Leone ambaye ni Maada Bio, ambaye aliweza kufika mapema kabisa, rais wa Tanzania Samia Suluhu, rais wa Burundi Evariste Ndayishimiye, rais wa Sudan Kusini Salva Kiir, rais wa Comoros Azal Assoumani, rais wa Egypt ambaye ni Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, mjumbe maalum kutoka Marekani ambaye ni John Kerry, kama nilivyokuwa nimekujuza, vile vile alikuwepo hapo jana, na tunatarajia vile vile kuweza kumsikia pia hii leo, kusikiza maoni yake ambayo amekuja nayo kutoka Marekani. Na vile vile tumeweza kumwona rais wa Mozambique Filipe Nyusi, vile vile aliweza kuwasili. Tumeweza kumwona vile vile rais wa Rwanda ambaye ni Paul Kagame, rais wa Ethiopia ambaye ni Zade Wokzud vile vile ameweza kuwasili. Vile vile tumeweza kuona mtazamaji, katibu mkuu wa Umoja wa Mataifa Antonio Guterres yupo katika kongamano hili la kihistoria kabisa la mabadiliko ya tabia nchi, na vile vile mwenyekiti wa Umoja wa Afrika ambaye ni Musa Faki. Nakumbuka kuwa mtazamaji, vile vile katika kongamano hili yupo rais wa taifa hili Dr. Samoei William Ruto ambaye atakuwa akiongoza mijadala ambayo itakuwa ikifanyika hii leo. Mjadala mkuu ambao umeweza kuratibiwa ambao utakuwa ukianza ni mjadala unaohusiana na ufadhili wa miradi ya mabadiliko ya tabia nchi. Basi katika wajumbe ambao wanaendelea kuwasili katika kongamano hili, tunaona vile vile yupo mjumbe amani rais wa taifa ambaye ameweza kufika hapa. Tutakuwa tunakujuza ni yupi ambaye ameweza kuwasili. Na mtazamaji, kumbuka kuwa vile vile katika kongamano hili limeweza kuhudhuriwa vile vile na mawaziri wote wa taifa hili, ambapo tumemwona waziri wa mazingira Soipan Tuya yupo. Huyo ni rais wa Kongo, mtazamaji, ambaye unaweza kumuona ameweza kuwasili katika kongamano hili maarufu sana la mabadiliko ya tabia nchi, na atakuwa akipokelewa pale. Tayari ashapokelewa na mwenyekiti wa Umoja wa Afrika Musa Faki. Basi anaelekea katika sehemu spesheli ambapo marais wote wa bara Afrika wanapokelewa na rais wa taifa hili Dr. William Ruto, na baada ya hapo basi watakuwa wakielekea katika ukumbi maalum wa Savo, ambapo ndipo kongamano hili spesheli kabisa linaendelea mali litakuwa likifanyika. Na mtazamaji, kama unavyoona hapo, basi hapo tuni baadhi ya mawaziri vile vile wa taifa hili ambao wameweza kuwasili katika kongamano hili, ambapo namuona waziri wa mazingira Soipan Tuya ameweza kuwasili. Vile vile mtazamaji, mkuu wa mawaziri vile vile ameweza kuwasili. Tuliweza kumwona alifika mapema sana. Na vile vile mtazamaji, hao tu ni baadhi ya wajumbe kutoka bara Afrika ambao wamefika, wana maoni yao ambao watakuwa wakijadili kuhusiana na mambo kadha wa kadha, kuhusiana na ufadhili kama unavyoona hapo. Basi anapokelewa na Rais Dr. William Ruto akimkaribisha kabisa katika kongamano hili spesheli la mabadiliko ya tabia nchi, ambapo mtazamaji, hii leo ni siku ya pili. Basi hapo anapiga picha ya kihistoria ambayo itaweza kuhifadhiwa kuweza kuonyesha kuwa Hawa aliweza kuwasili katika kongamano hili na vile vile akaweza kuingia na kutoa maoni ambayo yataweza kuendeleza hili la Afrika. Mtazamaji, kama unavyoona tu kukujuza na kuendelea kufika, kwani hili ni kongamano ambalo mtu bara Afrika ameweza kualikwa aweze kufika, aweze kutoa maoni yake, aweze kuchangia, aweze kuwasilisha watu wake kutoka taifa lake. Ni kongamano ambalo mtazamaji, tunatarajia kuwa wataweza kutia sahihi katika mkataba maalum ambao utakuwa ukiitwa the Nairobi Declaration. Mkataba huu mtazamaji, utakuwa ni makubaliano ambayo yatakuwa yametoa sahihi na marais wote wa bara Afrika kukubaliana ni jambo lipi ambalo wanataka liweze kuangaziwa katika makongamano makubwa ambayo yanajumuisha ulimwengu mzima, ili kuweza kujua ni lipi ambalo Afrika itaweza kupata, ikizingatiwa kuwa mtazamaji, bara hili limekumbwa na mambo mengi sana tangu awali. Kumekuwa na majanga ya mafuriko, vimbunga mtazamaji, ambavyo Afrika kwa wakati mwingine haijakuwa na uwezo wa kuvidhibiti. Lakini kutokana na kongamano hili tunatarajia kuwa tutaweza kupata fedha za kutosha ambazo zitakuwa zikitumika katika kudhibiti majanga kama haya. Kama unavyoona mtazamaji, hao tu ni baadhi ya wajumbe ambao wanaendelea kuwasili. Huyo ni Musa Faki ambaye ni mwenyekiti wa Umoja wa Afrika, ambaye mtazamaji anaendelea kupokea wajumbe, na vile vile naibu rais Rigathi Gachagua yupo pamoja na Musa Faki tu ambaye ni mwenyekiti wa Umoja wa Afrika, wakiendelea tu kupokea wajumbe ambao wanaendelea. Mtazamaji, sasa tunapoona wote wameweza kuingia ndani, ishara tosha kuwa basi baadhi ya wajumbe ambao walikuwa wanatarajiwa waweze kuwasili basi washawasili, ambao ni marais, wenyekiti wa miungano mikubwa kama vile Umoja wa Mataifa, ambapo tumeona katibu mkuu Antonio Guterres aliweza kuwasili. Hii ni ishara tosha mtazamaji kuwa wote washawasili, na basi wanaelekea ndani, ambapo sasa pindi tu watakapoingia katika ukumbi maalum wa Savo, sherehe hizi za leo, makongamano hili la leo litaanza kirasmi, ambapo kama nilivyokuwa nimekujuza kuwa tunatarajia kuweza kuona mazungumzo spesheli kuhusiana na ufadhili wa miradi ya mabadiliko ya tabia nchi. Mtazamaji, tukiweza kuangazia tu masuala ambayo yaliweza kujadiliwa hapo jana, ni kwa tuliweza kuona kuwa Rais William Ruto vile vile aliweza kugusia masuala kadha wa kadha, akisema kuwa bara la Afrika ni bara ambalo lina ukwasi mwingi mtazamaji, ikilinganishwa kwa masuala ya rasilimali na rasilimali ya kutosha barani Afrika. Lakini rasilimali hizi mtazamaji, tunazitumia kwa njia gani? Rais William Ruto aliweza kuwahimiza wenzake na vile vile wajumbe ambao waliweza kuwa wamefika katika kongamano hili, akiwajuza kuwa ipo haja ya kuweza kuangazia baadhi ya rasilimali hizi, na kuhakikisha kuwa zinaweza kufaidi bara hili la Afrika, ikizingatiwa kuwa mtazamaji, bara hili la Afrika lina madini ya kutosha, madini ambayo yanaweza kuuzwa, yanaweza kunadiwa, na Afrika ikaweza kupata pesa za kuweza kudhibiti majanga ambayo yamekuwa yakikumba bara hili. Lakini madini haya yamekuwa yakinadiwa, yakiuzwa kwa mapato ya chini sana, ikawa kuwa basi Afrika haipati pesa za kutosha kuweza kudhibiti majanga ambayo yanakumba taifa hili, bara hili mtazamaji. Kama unavyoona mtazamaji, muda si mchache kongamano hili speciali litakuwa liking'oa nanga, na tunatarajia kuweza kuona mijadala mbalimbali vile vile ambayo inagusia masuala kama vile ya kaboni, kunadiwa kwa kaboni katika masoko mbalimbali, huku Afrika ikipewa kipaumbele, akisema kuwa Afrika ikiwa ni bara ambalo linatoa gesi kali ya chini ambayo ni 4%, lakini athari ambazo bara hili linakumbwa nalo ni athari kali sana, mtazamaji, athari ambazo zimesababisha watu wakaweza kupoteza maisha yao, athari ambazo zimeweza kufanya baadhi ya watu, mtazamaji, wakakosa chakula. Kumekuwa na ukame katika baadhi ya mataifa ya bara Afrika, na tunatumai kuwa basi katika kongamano hilo wataweza kupata suluhu angalau ya jinsi ambavyo wataweza kukabiliana na majanga kama hayo ya ukame, vimbunga, mafuriko, mtazamaji. Ikizingatiwa kuwa hapo awali tuliweza kuona kwa utabiri ambao umeweza kutolewa hasa katika ukanda wa Afrika Mashariki, ni kuwa basi katika miezi ifuatayo tunatarajia kuweza kuona mvua za El Nino zinatarajiwa kuweza kuanza kunyesha kuanzia miezi ya Oktoba. Basi El Nino iwapo itakuja kama ilivyotangazwa, mtazamaji, itaweza kudhibitiwa kwa njia gani? Basi tunatarajia kuwa katika kongamano hili wataweza kuwa na suluhu ya mambo kama hayo, na vile vile wakiweza kuangazia kuwa kumeweza kuwa pia na utabiri kuwa kutakuwa na nzige ambao wanatarajiwa kuweza kuwa katika mataifa kadha wa kadha kama vile Kenya, Ethiopia, Somalia. Na nzige hawa wakija basi wanakuja na pepo mbalimbali, na pepo hizo zinapovuma wakaweza kuja katika mataifa haya, basi wataweza kuenea katika mataifa mengine, na nzige basi wakiwepo wanaharibu chakula, na kama wanaharibu chakula basi hii inamaanisha kuwa kutaweza kuwa na ukosefu wa chakula cha kutosha. Haya ni baadhi ya masuala ambayo yanatarajiwa kuweza kujadiliwa katika kongamano hili. Ukosefu wa chakula, ukosefu wa mvua, na mvua hizi zinapokuja zinakuwa ni kuwa zinaleta madhara, basi inakuwa kuwa bara hili linashindwa kudhibiti majanga kama haya. Vile vile maswali ambayo watu wengi barani Afrika wanajiuliza ni maswali kuhusiana na jinsi ambavyo pesa hizi zinaweza kufikia watu waliopo mashinani, watu ambao hawajaweza kufika katika kongamano hili, watu ambao ni wakulima tuseme. Wataweza kupata fedha hizi kivipi ili kuweza kujidhibiti na majanga kama haya? Basi watu wengi wanatarajia kuwa baada ya kongamano hili wataweza kutembea na kuhudhuria vikao mbalimbali katika nchi mbalimbali, katika vijiji mbalimbali, ili kuweza kuwahamasisha jinsi ambavyo wanaweza kujikinga dhidi ya athari za mabadiliko ya tabia nchi. Mtazamaji, kama nilivyokuwa nimekujuza ni kuwa baadhi ya viongozi ambao wameweza kuwasili katika kongamano hili spesheli la kihistoria ambalo limeweza kufanyika kwa mara ya kwanza kabisa tangu kutangazwa kwa mabadiliko ya tabia nchi kuwa janga. Miaka hiyo kufikia sasa ni takriban miaka 31. Janga hili la mabadiliko ya tabia nchi liliweza kutangazwa mwaka 1997 huko Rio. Kumeweza kuwa na makubaliano kama ule wa Kyoto, mtazamaji. Na swali ambalo watu wengi wanajiuliza ni kwa nini makubaliano haya ambayo huwa yanakubaliwa katika makongamano haya huwa hayafuatiliwi? Kumeweza kuwa na makubaliano kama lile la Paris. Kwa nini basi baada ya hapo mataifa ambayo huwa yanahudhuria kongamano hizi ama makongamano haya huwa hawafuatilii kuhakikisha kuwa yale ambayo wanaweza kujadili katika makongamano hayo basi yanaweza kutekelezwa katika mataifa yao? Ni mambo yapi ambayo huwa yanachangia ama yanafanya makubaliano hayo yasiweze kutekelezwa katika mataifa? Tunatarajia kwa makubaliano ambayo yataweza kukubaliwa katika kongamano hili, ambapo kutaweza kuwa na the NAIROBI Declaration, ni makubaliano ambayo mataifa yote yataweza kurudi na kuweza kutekeleza katika mataifa yao. Mtazamaji, masuala mengine ambayo tunatarajia yaweze kuzungumziwa katika kongamano hili ni masuala kuhusiana na kawi safi, na nishati mbadala. Ikizingatiwa kuwa hapo jana tuliweza kuona kuwa Rais William Ruto aliweza kusema kuwa hapa nchini Kenya tayari tushaanza kutumia kawi safi katika sekta mbalimbali, akisema kuwa kufikia sasa ni 92% ya kawi safi ambayo inatumiwa hapa nchini Kenya. Basi tu akiwahimiza wenzake kutoka mataifa mbalimbali kuhakikisha kuwa vile wanaweza kuangazia na kuiga mfano wa Kenya, ili vile waweze kuwa na kawi safi katika nchi zao, ili kuweza kupunguza madhara ama athari za mabadiliko ya tabia nchi. Vile masuala ambayo yanajadiliwa katika kongamano hili ama yana mwito ambao umeweza kutolewa ni mwito wa ushirikiano baina ya mataifa mbalimbali. Ushirikiano ambao kama wanavyosema, umoja ni nguvu, utangamano ni udhaifu, mtazamaji. Ukiweza kuwa na ushirikiano kama bara Afrika, itaweza kuwa ni jambo la maana kabisa ambalo litatuwezesha kuweza kuwa na usemi mmoja ambao utatuwezesha vile kuweza kupata ufadhili. Mtazamaji, wajumbe wanaendelea kuwasili katika ukumbi huu. Vile tumeweza kumwona gavana Nairobi ameweza kuwasili. Mkuu wa mawaziri vile ameweza kuwasili kuhakikisha kuwa kongamano hili linapewa uzito na linafuatiliwa sana na wajumbe wote, hasa hapa nchini Kenya na vile katika mataifa yote ya bara Afrika. Kama nilivyokuwa nimekujuza, watakuwa wakijadili masuala ya rasilimali za Afrika, masuala ya kuwekeza katika sekta mbalimbali ambazo zitawafaidi wa Afrika. Huu ni mwamko mpya, mtazamaji, mwamko mpya katika bara Afrika. Hili linaonyesha kuwa bara la Afrika limeamka na linataka masuala yake yaweze kujadiliwa na kupewa kipaumbele. Vile mtazamaji, izingatiwe kuwa vile wapo vijana ambao wameweza kuwasili katika kongamano hili na waliweza kuwa na makubaliano yao hapa awali. Waliweza kuwa na makubaliano yao hapo awali, mtazamaji. Kama unavyoona hapo kwenye runinga yako, naibu rais vile amewasili. Marais ndao, mtazamaji, wameanza kuwasili katika jumba maalum la kikao hiki spesheli la kihistoria na mabadiliko ya tabia nchi. Na wana marais hao wameanza kuingia hapa katika jumba la Sava, ambapo tupo walinzi wao wanaingia, mtazamaji. Walinzi wanaingia wakifuatiwa na marais. Hii ni ishara tosha, mtazamaji, kwa kongamano hili la hii leo, ambapo ni siku ya pili. Liliweza kuanza kirasmi hapo jana tarehe 4 mwezi Septemba, leo tarehe 5 siku ya pili, na linatarajiwa kuweza kuendelea hadi hapo kesho tarehe 6. Kama unavyoona kwenye runinga yako, mtazamaji, huyo ni katibu mkuu wa Umoja wa Mataifa Antonio Guterres. Anaweza kuwasili hapa katika jumba la Savo, ambapo ni sehemu ambapo vikao vyote vitaweza kufanyika. Basi sasa, mtazamaji, hao ni marais ambao wanaweza kuingia, marais ambao nilikuwa nimekutajia hapo awali. Rais wa Misri wa Egypt Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, Kagame wa Rwanda Paul Kagame, marais wengi tu. Tumemwona wa Sierra Leone Madabi, wa Tanzania Samia Suluhu, Evariste Ndayishimiye wa Burundi, Salva Kiir wa Sudan Kusini, Azali Assoumani wa Comoros, Filipe Nyusi wa Mozambique, Zade Wukzud wa Ethiopia, Rais William Ruto vile vile na muona shawasili. Mtazamaji, ni ishara tosha kabisa kwa kongamano hili linaenda kuanza muda si mchache. Kama nilivyokuwa nimekujuza mtazamaji, ni mwamko mpya katika bara la Afrika. Afrika iko tayari kuweza kujadili masuala yake na kupata suluhu ya masuala mbalimbali ambayo yamekuwa yakiathiri bara hili la Afrika. Ukumbi huu wa Savo, mtazamaji, Salva Kiir kama unavyomuona ameweza kuwasili, ambaye ni rais wa Sudan Kusini. Hali ndo kama hiyo mtazamaji, hapa katika ukumbi wa Savo. Marais kutoka mataifa mbalimbali ya bara Afrika wameweza kuwasili. Katibu mkuu wa Umoja wa Mataifa Antonio Guterres ameweza kuwasili. Mwenyekiti wa Umoja wa Afrika Musa Faki ameweza kuwasili. Tunaona vile vile viongozi wa Kenya, tamwona mama wa taifa Rachel Ruto na mwenzake hapo kando wa naibu wa rais, mke wa naibu wa rais Dorcas Gachagua. Basi mtazamaji, kongamano hili linaanza spesheli kwa sasa. Tuweze kusikiza mtazamaji.
Let's take our seats. Your Excellencies and all distinguished guests, to start us forth this morning, we have a Kikwetu production, a fusion of Samburu, Turkana, Borana, and Maasai communities performing with contemporary dancers and acrobats, giving you a taste of the diverse and rich Kenyan culture. Sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Kegeni jari magoli dukubuna lero Climate Summit from the 4th to the 6th September 2023. See you all in Nairobi.
Your Excellencies, Honourable Ministers, distinguished guests, good morning and welcome to the Africa Climate Summit. We heard from His Excellency President Ruto yesterday, where he so eloquently presented Africa's case for fairness, justice, and equity in helping the continent pursue its climate action efforts. If I may, I would like to emphasize His Excellency's points, which simply is this: Africa needs reform of the global financial sector to fund its climate
financement.
Business as usual will not cut it. I'll reiterate that. His Excellency's points was this: Africa needs reform of the global financial architecture to fund its climate action goals. Business as usual is not going to cut it. In fact, to continue as we are will only serve to prove the truth of Albert Einstein's definition of insanity. And I quote, "Insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over and expecting different results. We need to do something different."
We absolutely do. Thank you so much for that, Zain. And this is powerful. Africa called, and the world has come. His Excellency, you called, and Africa is setting an agenda. And I want us to give the leadership, the people, all the different organizations in this room a round of applause for coming together to do this. This is a moment. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, yesterday some powerful themes came through. Two quotes in particular from the young delegates stayed with me. They said, "Our countries will be burning and drowning, and you will not be there to save us." You know, it occurred to me that countries are drowning and burning today. So if we don't do something now, what will our children and generations to come experience? The other thing they said was, we have to trust you, and you must trust us. And I thought such wisdom, grace, hope, and responsibility captured in one simple statement. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we must call to the world from Nairobi today and make it clear that it is past time to address the tough issues. It is past time to hold the difficult but much needed conversations on Africa, risk, perception, reality, resources, policies, regulations, systems. And it's past time for these conversations to be guided by equity. That is what we need.
And Africa has the resources and assets, including mineral and energy resources, agricultural capacity, and natural capital to promote the global decarbonization agenda. But to realize this potential, the world needs to do its own part in helping steer Africa on the pathway to an inclusive, sustainable, and progressive future. At the fundamental level, that will require decoupling economic growth from environmental degradation. In the words of the late Wangari Maathai, an icon of Kenya and a Nobel Peace Laureate, and I quote, "We are very fond of blaming the poor for destroying the environment, but often it is the powerful, including governments, that are responsible," end quote. In other words, we are all in this together. It will require our combined efforts to overcome this challenge. The spirit of Harambee, as we say in Kiswahili.
And that means for those of you who don't know, let's all pull together, let's work together for a common goal and purpose. Zain, thank you for reminding us. We have icons, we have role models all over the continent doing incredible things. Thank you so much. We also have a young, innovative workforce. There's so much potential. So our call is, let's pull together. Thank you for coming. Thank you for ensuring you listen and are present and will act around a climate agenda determined by the African continent. An agenda that is going to safeguard our people, our communities, livelihoods on the continent, our economies, and ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, when we safeguard Africa, we safeguard the world. Can we give that a round of applause, please? Please. Safeguarding Africa is safeguarding the world.
Now, to help guide us on this journey with an incredible lineup of speakers, please give a very warm welcome to the Honorable Soipan Tuya, Cabinet Secretary, Environment, Climate Change and Forestry for the Government of Kenya. Mheshimiwa.
Thank you.
Excellency, President William Ruto, our host president, all our visiting heads of state, here with us today, all distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. History documents that Africa, and Kenya in particular, is the cradle of mankind. It is my hope and prayer that out of the cradle of mankind comes the all-time elusive solution to combating climate change. African-led solutions to decarbonize and steer a low-carbon development pathway for the globe. We are gathered here today to make history as the continent of Africa. The world is facing many challenges, but none has become so apparent, so threatening, and so devastating as the threat of climate change. And we can only respond by making history at this inaugural Africa Climate Summit. Everywhere we look in Africa, there is a climate change related story to tell. For example, in Malawi, Hurricane Freddy led to the loss of 200 people and nearly $2 billion US dollars worth of damage occasioned. Last year, the Horn of Africa came out of one of the worst droughts in decades, where we lost hundreds of lives and thousands of livestock. In fact, for the first time in Kenya, we had to track water for our wildlife in the national parks and reserves. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, although African countries are making every available effort to deal with the vagaries of climate change, our economies are continuing to be weighed down by mounting debts. As we speak, 31 out of the 37 heavily indebted poor countries in the world are in Africa. Over 20 years of climate change negotiations have yielded agreements and promises that have delivered very little for Africa. Instead, the imagery of Africa as a poor continent, a victim, keep dominating the climate negotiations year in, year out. The fact that Africa has historically contributed very little to the global emissions has remained an inconvenient truth, yet receiving no reciprocity from the rest of the world for the contribution we make. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this inaugural Africa Climate Summit presents an opportunity like no other for Africa to change the course of history. Millions of young Africans are looking up to African leaders here to leave them with a promise, a visible promise, to make them feel that there is a future where they have hope to get green jobs, live a dignified life, and thrive. We are looking to the summit to chart a green growth pathway for the African continent, set the stage for Africa to lead the globe towards a more ecologically responsible global industrialization, catalyzed by financing that is accessible, adequate, and affordable. The world is waiting for something anew out of this week. We must not be held hostage to the past, but allow ourselves to reimagine a future where, as Africa, we lift ourselves from the fatigue of despair and make history. Excellencies, I am persuaded that the time is now, and I beseech us to respond to this historical call by proposing radical solutions to the world that will help us deal with the climate change. I invite us to listen to the inner urge calling us to serve humanity, that we go down in history, that it is out of Africa, the cradle of mankind, that the solution for climate change came forth. Excellencies, allow me now to invite to kick us off, the President of the African Development Bank, who has been in the middle of this discourse and supporting a lot of support to the cause. Welcome, Dr. Adesina Akiwumi.
Thank you very much, Cabinet Secretary. Your Excellency, William Ruto, President of Kenya, and our gracious host, and my dear brother. Your Excellency, Asali Assoumani, President of Comoros and Chairperson of the African Union. Your Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, Your Excellencies, the First Ladies, Your Excellency Moussa Faki, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Your Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations. We are also joined today by Your Excellency Ban Ki-moon, former Secretary General of the United Nations, Your Excellency Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, Your Excellency Mustafa Madhoudi, Prime Minister of Egypt, Your Excellency Sultan Al-Jaber, COP28 President-designate, honorable ministers, ambassadors, heads of diplomatic missions, the amazing youth and women of Africa. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning, everyone. Abari Sa Asubuhi. I think I got it right somehow. I wish to commend you, Your Excellency President Ruto, for your excellent leadership in convening this Africa Climate Summit, and for your dynamic and passionate leadership in spearheading Africa's first Climate Summit. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you for hosting us all in this beautiful nature-blessed country of Kenya. The African Development Bank is pleased to be a major sponsor of the Africa Climate Summit. The presence in such large numbers of Your Excellencies, heads of state and government, ministers and development partners from around the world says it all. Africa's voice on climate change will resonate across the world. The Africa Climate Summit will shape the future pathway of Africa's development. We gather because the people of Africa expect us to act. We gather because the future of the youth of Africa is at stake. We gather because we must galvanize global actions on climate. We gather because our collective existence is at risk. Climate change is short-changing Africa. Droughts and floods have been increasing across the continent. No country is spared. As we gather today, if we strain our ears enough, we will hear the calls of urgency from farmers whose crops and livestock are being destroyed, the voices of fishing folks whose catch is reducing and livelihoods are being imperiled, the voices of the young whose future is being compromised, the voices of women and children who bear the brunt of climate change, the voices of economies unable to cope with the ever-rising costs of climate-induced risks. We have a duty and responsibility to hear these voices and to act with a greater sense of urgency. And responding requires action at three levels. At the global level, the developed economies must meet their commitment to provide $100 billion annually in climate finance. The global climate financial architecture must be changed to prioritize the needs of Africa. At the national level, we must accelerate actions on climate adaptation. And that is why the African Development Bank has committed to providing $25 billion towards climate finance by 2025. We have also launched the African Adaptation Acceleration Program, together with the Global Center on Adaptation, the largest climate adaptation program in the world. Africa must develop with what it has, not what it does not have. Africa is blessed with large sources of renewable energy in the world. Renewables from solar, hydro, wind, and geothermal. But we cannot power Africa with potential. We must fully unlock Africa's renewable energy potential. That's why the African Development Bank is implementing $20 billion Desert to Power program to harness the power of solar and deliver electricity for 250 million people. We must power every home, every school, every hospital, and provide stable, affordable, and reliable power. But we must, Your Excellencies, be pragmatic. Africa must use its natural gas and combine it with renewable resources. The International Energy Agency's analysis shows that doing so would only add 0.5% to global emissions. Give us space to grow. We must ensure that Africa's food and agricultural systems are climate resilient. The African Development Bank's flagship program, Technologies for African Agricultural Transformation, has provided 12 million farmers in 21 countries with climate resilient agricultural technologies. In Ethiopia, climate resilient wheat varieties supported by the bank has helped it to become self-sufficient in wheat in just 3 years. We are acting at scale to feed Africa with climate resilience. Under the leadership of President Macky Sall, as the then chairperson of the African Union, and the strong leadership of you, our heads of state and government, we succeeded with the Feed Africa Summit held in Dakar in January. We developed food and agriculture delivery compacts for African countries. We have mobilized, Your Excellency Presidents, heads of state and government globally, $72 billion to support African countries to implement these food and agricultural delivery compacts and to assure food security and food sovereignty within 5 years, and doing so with climate resilient agricultural systems. I wish to recognize all development partners from around the world and the African Union Commission who work so tirelessly with us to make this happen. Thank you very much. We will repeat this at the Africa Climate Summit with the development of climate change adaptation investment compacts to help channel financing to national climate adaptation action at scale. We must ensure that resources mobilized do not stay simply in government offices, but reach and protect the lives of people in our villages, in our towns, and in our cities. All lives must be protected from climate change. We must put the youth and women at the core of climate financing. That's why the African Development Bank and the Global Center on Adaptation are announcing here today the launch of a $1 billion facility for Youth Adapt program that will accelerate access to financing for the youth to tackle climate change. The youth are not just the future of Africa, the youth are the present of Africa. The African Development Bank is also rolling out the establishment of youth entrepreneurship investment banks, new financial institutions that will support and grow the businesses of the youth all across Africa. Finally, we must revalue, Your Excellencies, the wealth of Africa by accounting for the proper valuation of its abundant natural resources, including its vast forests that sequester carbon. Few may know that the Congo Forest Basin is the world's largest carbon lungs, larger than the Amazon forest. Yet, Africa's rich nature wealth and the global value of its carbon it sequesters for the world are not accounted for in the estimation of its GDP. It is not enough to praise Africa for its rich natural capital. Its GDP must take that into consideration. Africa's GDP must therefore be revalued based on its carbon sequestration and biodiversity, which provide global public goods. If this is done, the debt to adjusted GDP ratio of several African countries is much lower, and they will have greater headroom to borrow more financing to support their development, including investing in the greening of their economies. We must, Your Excellencies, therefore, turn Africa's economies green, not because others ask us to do so, but because it is in our interest to do so. Africa must develop its own carbon markets, properly price its carbon, and turn its vast carbon sinks into new sources of enormous wealth. Africa cannot be nature rich and cash poor. As we look towards COP28, African needs must be front and center, powered by the leadership of our heads of state and government, our youth and the private sector, and the voices of our communities. We must be the vuvuzelas of climate financing for Africa. Together with partners from around the world, let's make it happen for Africa. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Gracias. Shukran. Asante sana.
Excellencies, our next speaker is His Excellency Musa Faki Mahamat, the chairperson of the African Union Commission. Welcome, Your Excellency. A formidable global reputation of peacekeeping. We know you have.
Excellency Dr. William Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya, Excellency Azalia Soumani, President of the Union of the Comoros and current Chairman of the African Union, Excellencies, Head of State, Government and Delegation, Excellency Antonio Guterres, United Nations Secretary General, Excellency Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Union Commission, representatives of international organizations, financial institutions, civil society, youth, women, honorable ministers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. First and foremost, I would like to thank President William Ruto, the government and the people of Kenya for the exceptional hospitality accorded to us since our arrival in this hospitable and green capital, Nairobi. The beautiful and natural environment in this country augurs well for the great success of our climate summit. The organization of this climate summit in such friendly conditions in just 6 months, thanks to the decision of the African Union Summit last February, is striking proof of the excellence of your leadership, dear friend William. I sincerely congratulate you. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, the
recent report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, confirms our fears. Africa is warming faster than the rest of the world. If this phenomenon is not stopped, climate change will continue to have a serious negative impact on the growth of the African economies. Agricultural productivity has been reduced by 34% between 1961, since 1961, due to climate change, more than any other region. Hence, it will have an unbearable pressure on the food systems in Africa. African countries thus face disproportionate burdens and risks arising from unpredictable weather patterns, particularly prolonged droughts and devastating floods at all levels. Massive humanitarian crises provoke detrimental impacts on economies, health, education, peace and security, and other related risks. For example, the season 2022-2023, about 18 million people have been affected by drought in the Horn of Africa alone. Recently, tropical cyclone Fred has affected more than 1.2 million of people and caused the death of more than 700 people. It is also estimated that between 2019 and 2023, the economic loss as a result of disasters in Africa is between 20 and 35.5 billion American dollars. This gloomy list is not exhaustive. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, climate change has spared no sector. It is to be recalled that Africa has around 400 million who do not have access to clean drinking water, and about 700 million do not have access to a very good sanitation. And this also indicates, experts indicate that there is a gap, a financing gap of 11 to 20 billion dollars. So we are obviously on the verge of seeing climate degradation. It is not the only factor, and it would be wrong not to integrate this in our global analysis of the negative factors, including governance, which is at the very center. I do not want to yield to pessimism. And in the general, it is how fortunate that in the table we have some beacons and favorable indicators. I cannot help reminding that 600 million people do not have access to electricity, and 200 million of them do not have access to clean cooking and are exposed to all respiratory problems and diseases due to smoke. And because of climate change, we have problems in our infrastructure, and we need to develop profitable infrastructure and spend at least $160 billion per year. Indeed, it is encouraging to note that the African governments have devoted about 3.5% of their GDP to the development of infrastructure over the past 20 years. It is too little compared to some emerging countries. China and India, for example, devote 7.7 and 5.2% of their GDP, respectively, in infrastructure. We can thus see in which direction efforts have to be made. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this summit affords us an excellent opportunity to translate the climate ambitions of Africa into investment opportunities, to consolidate our voices on matters on burning issues of climate change, to prepare for the UN Climate Summit and for COP28 28 in the United Arab Emirates. At these meetings of global importance, Africa must, among other challenges, highlight the worrying and sometimes tragic situation in the Sahel, in the Horn of Africa, where drought and floods alternate. In the Congo River Basin, with dangerous deforestation and the disastrous consequences of cyclones in southern Africa and in the island states, it is urgent that Africa come to all these meetings with concrete proposals to be implemented without delay. I strongly reiterate my call to come to the next two meetings with precise proposals without drowning them in literature and the usual litany on the imperative need for collective justice for Africa, where responsibility is very limited in the pollution of the world, with an inversely proportional share of the volume of global investment in the field of environment. This call for a restoration of justice for Africa would benefit from being supported by a real reform of the global financial architecture, for which a high-level panel is rightly devoted at this summit. Obviously, this reform must resolutely focus on the financial organs and structures, institutions which structure the universe, which operate far from Africa. In this desired reform, a question comes to mind: the weight of the debt and the financing gap of the SDGs. Africa alone represented a need of $1.3 billion per year for sustainable development needs by 2030, while the financing needs for SDGs in the same period were $2.5 billion for financing developing countries. Everyone knows that the public debt stock in sub-Saharan Africa at the end of 2023 was estimated at $1.1 trillion out of 650 billion SDRs mobilized. Africa received only 33 billion, which is only 4.5%. In view of these staggering figures and many others, it is clear that there is no relevant global intervention in favor of Africa without a credible solution for the crippling debt challenge of Africa. To wage a struggle which includes financing adaptation, $100 billion per year, Africa has galvanized its will in its common position through a momentum unifying African voices, and it will be central point of our agenda in G20 as soon as we join it. However, in this struggle, Africa cannot just be satisfied with incantation. Just like for its independence, it is a challenge to rely on its own personal efforts, on its own genius, the quality and its virtues of bold, imaginative, united and interdependent leadership. I wish you full success to our deliberations. I thank you very much. Asante sana.
Excellencies, we are overwhelmed by the support that we have received for the summit, and we want to listen to each and every one of us. So I would like to plead with your Excellencies that we stick to the agreed 5 minutes so that we can have everybody speaking to this. Next, Excellencies, out of COP27 in Egypt was the establishment of a loss and damage fund and the finalization of the details to implement the Santiago network. It was also the first time food security was recognized in the COP conversations. The Arab Republic of Egypt was a COP27 presidency, and it is my honor now to invite His Excellency Mustafa Madbouli, the Prime Minister of Egypt. Welcome, Your Excellency.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فخامة الرئيس ويليام روتو رئيس جمهورية كينيا.
Président du Kenya, distingués invités, distingués présidents, mesdames et messieurs, je veux tout d'abord
تحيات فخامة الرئيس عبد الفتاح السيسي.
Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, président de la République arabe d'Égypte. Il m'est un grand privilège de participer au nom de l'Égypte à cette réunion de haut niveau. Et je félicite Son Excellence
لا سيما وانه ياتي بعد اشهر قليله من نجاح مصر وقارتنا الافريقيه باستضافه اكبر مؤتمر للامم المتحده لتغير المناخ بل وفي تاريخ العمل تعدد الاطراف حتى الان. السيدات والساده تاتي قمتنا اليوم في الوقت الذي يشهد
un moment critique de notre monde et en particulier le continent africain qui témoigne
المناخية من موجات جفاف بالقرن الأفريقي ومنطقة الساحل إلى حرائق غابات بالمغرب العربي، ومن أعاصير قاتلة بالجنوب الأفريقي إلى زيادة في درجات حرارة المحيطات وارتفاع سطح البحر بشواطئ مصر والدول الأفريقية المتوسطية، وكلها تؤثر بصورة مباشرة في استدامة المعيشة وتمثل ضغوطا جديدة ومتزايدة على مجتمعاتنا وعلى بلداننا الأفريقية. ولذلك فإن مصر ومن منطلق التزامها بالمساهمة الفعالة في الجهد الدولي لمواجهة والتعامل مع التغيرات المناخية عملت بشكل حثيث على الخروج بنتائج ملموسة في مؤتمر شرم الشيخ تسهم في الانتقال إلى مرحلة التنفيذ الفعلية عبر تسريع وتيرة تنفيذ الإجراءات والمشروعات على أرض الواقع، وتتعامل مع مطالب الدول النامية بتحقيق العدالة المناخية وتعزيز الجهد الدولي للتحول العادل والسريع للاقتصاد منخفض الانبعاثات والقادر على التعامل مع آثار تغير المناخ. وحرصت مصر كرئيس للمؤتمر على أن تكون شرم الشيخ محطة هامة لتسليط الضوء على خصوصية الاحتياجات والظروف الأفريقية في سياق الاستجابة للخطر الوجودي لتغير المناخ. وفي ذات السياق يأتي مؤتمرنا اليوم يؤكد التزام قارتنا الأفريقية بتحقيق التحول العادل للاقتصاد الأخضر، ويدعم المطالب المشروعة بالحصول على نصيب عادل من الدعم المالي والتقني ومن تدفقات الاستثمارات الدولية، بما يسمح بالاستفادة من الإمكانيات الهائلة والموارد المتميزة في قارتنا، ليس فقط لتمويل مشروعات خفض الانبعاثات ولكن أيضا لمشروعات التكيف وبناء القدرة على الصمود، وبالإضافة إلى توفير دعم الدول النامية لمواجهة الخسائر والأضرار المرتبطة بالمناخ. وأؤكد في هذا الصدد على الدور الهام والمحوري الذي تقوم به لجنة رؤساء الدول والحكومات الأفريقية ومجلس وزراء البيئة الأفارقة ومجموعة المفوضين الأفارقة في تسليط الضوء على أولوياتنا في مواجهة تغير المناخ وتبعاته. السيدات والسادة، يقع محور التوسع في الطاقة النظيفة ومصادر الطاقة الجديدة والمتجددة في قلب النموذج التنموي الجديد، وهو ما رحبت به دول القارة وترجمته في تعهداتها الوطنية بالتوسع في الطاقة المتجددة. وتحفل قارتنا بالأمثلة المبشرة والملهمة، بما في ذلك مصر التي وصلت لنحو 20% من إنتاج الطاقة من المصادر المتجددة، ساعية إلى الوصول إلى 42% بحلول عام 2030. وفي هذا الإطار أود الإشادة بالرؤية التي طرحتها الرئاسة الإماراتية لمؤتمر كوب 28 من خلال معالي الدكتور سلطان الجابر حول مستقبل الانتقال للطاقة المتجددة، وسيكون لها دور بالتأكيد في إنجاح مخرجات مؤتمر كوب 28 وتلبيته لتوقعات أفريقيا والعالم النامي. السادة الحضور، يظل النفاذ للتمويل هو عنق الزجاجة الذي يواجه أفريقيا والدول النامية من أجل تحويل خططها وأحلامها إلى واقع معاش يسهم في معالجة الأزمة المناخية، وفي نفس الوقت لا يمس بمسيرتها التنموية أو يثقل من ديونها. ويمثل اجتماعنا هذا فرصة ممتازة لتناول موضوعات تمويل المناخ، وتتمحور رؤية مصر في هذا الصدد حول العناصر التالية. أولاً، ضرورة إعادة النظر في أدوات التمويل المتاحة حالياً والتحول إلى التمويل الميسر والمنح لتسريع وتيرة التحول المطلوب. ثانياً، أهمية مراجعة معايير تدفق الاستثمارات لضمان حصول القارة الأفريقية على نصيبها العادل من التمويل. ثالثاً، التأكيد على أن تمويل المناخ وهو تمويل جديد وإضافي وليس سحباً من مخصصات الدعم التنموي. رابعاً، ضرورة العمل على تفعيل آلية واحدة وفعالة ومناسبة لإعادة استخدام الديون الحالية من خلال آلية فعالة لتحويل الديون إلى تمويل المناخ. وفي هذا السياق نتطلع لأن يمثل مؤتمر دبي المقبل اختراقاً في تنفيذ تعهد الدول المتقدمة بتوفير 100 مليار دولار سنوياً لتمويل المناخ الذي لم يتم إدراكه رغم كونه ليس أكثر من التزام رمزي بالمسؤولية التاريخية المشتركة ومتباينة الأعباء. ختاماً، فإنني أود إعادة التأكيد على أن طبيعة قضية تغير المناخ والتعامل معها لا يكون إلا من خلال منظور تعاوني قائم على تعزيز النظام متعدد الأطراف يؤسس على الإنصاف والعدالة ومراعاة الظروف الوطنية للدول. وأنتهز هذه الفرصة للثناء على ما طرحته جمهورية كينيا الشقيقة من عناصر ورؤية لصياغة نقاشاتنا في الأيام القادمة، ولأجدد التأكيد على دعم جمهورية مصر العربية الكامل بصفتها الوطنية وكرئيس للدورة الحالية لمؤتمر الأمم المتحدة للمناخ للنسخة المقبلة بدبي تحت رئاستها الإماراتية، التي نثق تماما في قدرتها والتزامها بالبناء على نتائج شرم الشيخ وإدراك المزيد من النتائج الإيجابية. وشكرا لحضراتكم.
Your Excellencies, Africa is Europe's closest neighbor and our sister continent. Our geopolitics therefore concern each other. Europe and Africa have close economic, cultural, and geographical ties. To speak for the European Commission, I would now take this opportunity to invite Her Excellency Ursula von der Leyen, the European Union President. Welcome, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much, dear President Ruto, for hosting this Africa Climate Summit. And thank you very much for your leadership on climate action ever since you took office. I very much welcome Kenya's Climate Change Act 2023 that was launched during this summit and that puts strong emphasis on carbon markets. We fully support you on this important topic. Presidents, prime ministers, fellow leaders, excellencies, I want to greet my colleague Moussa Faki, Chairman of the African Union. I want to greet the President Assoumani from the Comoros. I want to greet Secretary General Antonio Guterres, Dr. Sultan Al Jaber, President of the COP28, my fellow leaders, ladies and gentlemen. I am deeply honored to participate in this discussion. This summit is a crucial step to prepare the upcoming COP28 meeting and to make sure that Africa's voice resonates around the world and that Africa's priorities as a continent that is most affected by climate change are duly taken on board. Today, I'm here not only to listen to you, but also to bring Europe's offer to be your ally at COP28 and to work together on all issues on the agenda. Because however different our two continents may look, we share the same interests when it comes to climate action. We hear you, President Ruto, and dear friends, when you say that Africa's first priority is to grow your economy, yes, and lift as many people as possible out of poverty. Yes, you're so right. Climate action is part of the solution. You are part of the solution. With your huge potential for renewable energy and clean hydrogen, your critical raw materials, your incredible nature and biodiversity, and your young workforce, you can help clean up global energy systems and supply chains while creating good jobs here and economic opportunities yet that your people demand, rightly so. This is a win-win partnership which benefits Africa and the world. For instance, the benefits of expanding Africa's clean energy sector would be massive. By speeding up the transition to solar and wind power, energy sector jobs in Africa could double in a few years. And Africa could produce enough clean energy not only to power up your continent, but also to export abroad. Climate action can be one of the main drivers of Africa's growth. But for this, Africa needs massive investment. And Europe wants to be your partner, in closing this investment gap. First of all, we fully support the need for multilateral development bank reform. It is time to move from words to action, absolutely. Secondly, investment has to come. And this is why 150 billion euro in our investment plan are designated for Africa. We call it Global Gateway. They are aimed at the African continent. Global Gateway supports investments ranging from hydropower plants in the DRC, Burundi, Rwanda, and Tanzania, to the 1 billion euro initiative on climate adaptation and resilience in Africa, which we announced at COP27. And Global Gateway is unique in the global investment landscape. We're not only interested in extracting resources. We want to partner with you to create local value chains, to create good jobs here in Africa. We want to share European technology with you. We want to invest in skills for local workers. This is crucial for the young people, because the stronger you are as suppliers, the more Europe will diversify supply chains towards Africa, and the more we both will de-risk our economies. It's a clear win-win. Namibia, for instance, is now building a new hydrogen industry, as well as rare materials value chains in partnership with Europe. And later this morning, President Ruto and I will conclude a new hydrogen partnership between Kenya and the European Union, with the objective to further develop the green hydrogen economy, and with the full support of Team Europe. This is good news for Africa and for Europe alike. So we should work very closely as partners. Yet, public money from major economies, however crucial, is not enough. And this is why we need to bring the conversation on climate financing to the global stage at COP28. Let me briefly share 3 specific points that will be discussed here in Nairobi to pave the way towards COP28. First, on attracting private investment to Africa. Second, on carbon pricing and carbon credits.